Welcome back to the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, I'm Adam here with my co-host Ben, and we got a good one for you guys today. And it's nothing scripted. It's nothing too crazy. We're not sharing the secret sauce that we've been holding back and not telling you guys about. This was just going to be a little bit more informal. And just going to be talking through the market right now. This is getting recorded right now, halfway through August.
Yeah.
And Ben and I are both getting a lot of questions right now with just stuff going on in the news about what to, expect over the next quarter, as well as just really in the next few weeks when potentially there might be a reduction in the interest rate for mortgages. So before we get into all of that, though, just would love to welcome my co-host Ben to the show once again and hear how he's doing. What's up, dude?
Hey, glad to be back. And I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today because I've had so many buyers want to know what's going on, what's happening with the market, what is going on with affordability and interest rates. I was also in Tulsa, Oklahoma last week, and my brother is a real estate investor out there. We have a couple of projects that we're working on. His wife is a real estate agent. So it was fun to get their perspective on what they're seeing in a different market. You and I are here in Denver. As a lender, I am licensed in all 50 states. I know that you're focusing on this Denver metro market. One thing that was so fun, though, about Tulsa is there is a lot of oil money out there. And what was interesting is that back in the day, Tulsa, and I'm talking more around the turn of the 20th century, so early 1900s, but Tulsa was kind of like the Silicon Valley of today because it was still that oil and a lot of that industrial business that was building America, and that's what Tulsa was known for. So anyways, we got to drive through some of these neighborhoods in Tulsa that are older, more historic neighborhoods, and I'm telling you, Denver does not have neighborhoods like this. I mean, they were just stunning, just absolutely stunning, jaw-dropping neighborhoods, so beautiful. And just to be able to drive through them and just they were not just mansions, they were palaces. Just absolutely incredible. And like, we have nothing here in Denver to even compare to.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge in Denver right now is, like you said, affordability, specifically the median household income in comparison to what the median sales price of houses are, and just that a massive disparity between the two. So before we kind of move on from talking about Tulsa, do you know off the top of your head what like the median sales price is? And if I'm sorry to put you on the spot, I don't need to have it be exact, but I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that's working in Tulsa's favor, as well as a lot of these other, cities in the Sun Belts. Just understanding that, it's so much easier when you're a little bit more aligned with those two.
Yeah, I don't know what the average sales price is, but what I do know is that in markets like that, you have options. You can literally go buy a home in Tulsa for $80,000. Now, it may not be in a great area and it probably needs some work, but you can still go buy a single family residence as an option. And for $80,000, you can find duplexes for under $200,000. Your average $300,000 home out in Tulsa is probably the equivalent of a $900,000 home here in Denver. And then if you go up into that next range where you're looking at $500,000 or $600,000 homes in Tulsa, you're looking at the equivalent of like a $2 or $3 million home here in Denver. And so there are a lot of options out there. And when it does come to the affordability, things have slowed down out there as well. So buyers out there are still definitely feeling it, but I always go back to at least you have more options, more flexibility. And that's one thing that is really holding some of these bigger markets like Denver back is when I'm pre-approving someone, it's, how I describe it is the amount of resources required just to make the mortgage payment, especially if you're a first-time home buyer. It is the amount of resources you have to go to a job and spend all this time to earn this money, this income, to then make a very, very high mortgage payment. And so it's difficult with home values, with property taxes where they're at. Homeowners insurance has gone up substantially over the last year and a half. Interest rates are still elevated. So buyers are really, really feeling that. And it matters more in these higher price markets.
Mm-hmm. And for anybody out there that maybe is listening or watching today that's in Denver, and maybe we're speaking to you directly where you're just feeling so beat up with just the pipe dream of ever owning in Denver because of this affordability issue, that if you really get to the point where you just feel like it's just not a reality in Denver, there's always also the opportunity to maybe still rent in Denver, but still purchase an investment property in another state that has much more affordable options like Ben was talking about. So, obviously that's a little bit, against the norm as far as most people start off in real estate buying their primary residence. But I think as time goes on, and for people that do really want to stay in a place like Colorado and in Denver, where affordability is so challenging, I think that might be becoming even more of a reality for more people that still want to get in the game. We've shared different quotes, different statistics where, homeowners have 43 times the net worth that renters do. Well, if you're just feeling beat up and you just feel like you can't buy in Denver, well, don't let that be the excuse that instead of ever buying, you just become content with renting. And instead of building up that nest egg, you end up just kind of thinking it's not for you and just renting, so there's still ways to build wealth through real estate, even if it's not your primary. So long-winded way of just saying that if that might be something that's piquing your interest, definitely reach out to us. Ben can definitely hop on a call with you and really share some firsthand experiences that he's been able to do himself, as well as helping others build up net worth through investment properties.
It sounds very counterintuitive to go straight into the investment world when you're renting, but I would agree with you 100%. And some of the literature that I've read recently talks about just that, where it's really important you have to get into the game of real estate. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. But if you're in a high price market, the reality is it's probably going to be very, very difficult. And if you don't have significant assets, or if you're not a dual income household, you may not have any options. But there are options out there. They're just not going to be in your market. But most people, they either write themselves off saying, I'm never going to be able to buy a home. They don't think about these other options, because Tulsa isn't the only market. There's a variety of markets in the Midwest and the Sun Belt where you can still buy affordable real estate that makes sense to rent, to rehab, to flip. But you got to get connected with professionals. You got to build out the network. You got to get connected. And there's a lot of different ways to do that, but it is possible. And it's funny that we're comparing Tulsa to, kind of having this conversation, Tulsa, Denver. But then a couple of weeks before that, I was out in Santa Barbara, California, and that is a completely different market. It's Denver on steroids. I mean, you think Denver is unaffordable, go out there. And I was having this conversation with my brother where even if you're someone in Santa Barbara and you are doing phenomenal, you have a very high income, it's still incredibly difficult to purchase something out there, just because real estate is it's one of the most expensive places in the world for real estate. And we were having the conversation where, what would you do? Would you go and invest in other markets, or would you look at opportunities for, say that your work allows for remote work? Would you move to a place that is more affordable so you could build something over the next 5 to 10 years? And when I say build something, I'm talking about getting in the game of real estate and building some net worth. So would you make that sacrifice? And I am starting to see more people move to some of these lower price markets where affordability is not as crazy as it is in some of these coastal cities and places like Denver, but it requires a sacrifice. Not everyone is going to be willing to pack up and move, but it's something that if you want to get ahead, you got to do something. You got to get in the game one way or the other. You don't have to own real estate to get ahead, but it's one of the most proven ways to get ahead.
Mm-hmm. If you guys ever want to pick up a book that's really good on this specific topic, passive real estate investing, just kind of this out-of-state real estate investing specifically, check out Bigger Pockets. Brandon Turner, he used to be the host of the Bigger Pockets podcast. He wrote a book a few years ago that I think is really valuable on this specific point, just kind of getting it into maybe people that aren't that familiar with real estate investing, getting it into their head, and got it into my head too when I read it, just about how you don't have to have this tangible thing that you need to drive by every week and see firsthand. You can own a property in a different state. I know you have several properties that you might see once or twice a year, if that,
Mm-hmm.
And just being able to look at this in a different lens where it's not this burden of, oh my gosh, I need to be close enough where I need to go, fix the toilet if it breaks at 10 o'clock at night. You have people for that. It's all about building up that team.
Yeah.
And once you have that team in place, it just takes a little bit of time and effort and headache at first. But once you've got that established and really built out correctly, you'd be amazed at how much other people can do for you when they're aligned with what your mission is.
Yeah, it's incredible. And the first investment property that I ever purchased was out of state. I owned my primary, but the first investment property that I purchased was out of state in Arizona. And at the time that I bought it, I didn't have a property manager. I didn't have a network set up, but I had a calling. I had a vision for myself that I knew this is something that I wanted to do. I knew that I needed to do it. And then all of that other stuff fell into place over time. It didn't happen right away. I had to go through a handful of different property managers, a handful of different pool people. But we were able to make it happen. And 7 or 8 years later, now it's very hands off. I'm really not involved at all. They deal with the maintenance, the calls, the repairs, the issues, and that's how I want it. I was having this conversation with my brother, but it's when you get stuck in all of the little nitty gritty, the tenants emailing you about a plumbing issue, or the sink's backing up, or there's a problem with the toilet flushing. When you have all of this little nagging stuff, kind of going back to our podcast last week, it just disrupts that momentum. I have to value my time. Put a high enough dollar amount on my time that I should not be the one that is going through and dealing with these specific issues. It's like folding the laundry. I think folding the laundry at the house is very, very important, but I'm not the one that should be doing that. Someone else should be doing that. And that's why I get other people involved. So I can make sure that I'm using my time and putting that into the things that are the most effective for me, the skills that I have that no one else has.
Mm-hmm. Love that. Well, let's just talk a little bit more now about the Denver market specifically. So we talked a little bit about, not international, but just national real estate investing with, potentially still being able to succeed in real estate if you're feeling beaten down with the Denver market. But yeah. I think this is I just want to read you a quick thing that I got in an email today from another expert here in the Denver real estate market. And I just think it's kind of like a good starting point for what we want to talk about. So, mortgage rates have been sliding for 3 straight weeks. They're now sitting at their lowest point in 10 months. But the question is, will they keep falling or are they going to bounce back? Well, right now we have softer labor market data that's driving expectations for a federal rate cut in September. A new Fed nomination could also tilt the board towards lower rates sooner. And there's several key economic reports in the next month, including the Jackson Hole Symposium, PCE inflation, the August jobs report, and CPI. And all of this could really shift investor sentiment and move rates before the Fed even meets. Inventory right now in Denver is still higher than recent years, but recently we've also, though, seen price reductions on over 40% of current active listings. So if rates do dip toward that 6% mark, buyer demand is most likely going to surge and shift that negotiating power back over to the sellers. So Ben, I'd love just to kind of help break this down a little bit for our audience, exactly how some of these events are moving rates right now, but also what we might see these rates go to after that federal rate cut that's expected, and how to just really understand and see into the future in September today. So if somebody that's listening or watching us today is aspiring to buy real estate in the next 12 months, the key is really being able to be first to act on some of this stuff and really catching. For example, let me use an example really quick and then I'll pass it over to you.
Okay.
Right now, it's very, very, very much a buyer's market, meaning that buyers have the upper hand. They've got a lot more leverage and power. Well, if you're a buyer and you see that there is going to be some of this transition where it's going to turn back into a little bit more of a seller's market, being able to have that insight today and being able to really capitalize on that. Because what happens is after that federal rate gets announced, it's going to take a few weeks before the market starts to respond to it. But if you're actively educating yourself and watching and listening to podcasts and other things like this, hopefully you can take advantage of that and really act before a lot of the other people have the ability to, and potentially get a better deal. Just really set yourself up to be in the best position possible when the time is right for you.
Yeah, and remind me to talk about temporary buy downs, because that's really, really important. It's a really powerful tool. But what I wanted to do really quickly is go back to the end of July. And at the end of the July, the last Fed meeting, they decided not to cut rates. Now, what was interesting about that, something happened for the first time since 1993. Normally, those Fed decisions by the committee members is unanimous. But on this last meeting at the end of July, it was not unanimous. We had two committee members that dissented, meaning two voted for rate cuts, with the rest following the chairman and voting to hold rates steady. And then 2 days after that, that's when that jobs report was revised. And that is what really drove rates down, how poorly those job numbers were. So just keep in mind that when there's bad news for the economy, and this is what people have to remember when it comes to interest rates usually come down when there's something negative happening in the world, in the economy, or something domestically. So when was the last time interest rates were really, really low? Well, that was during COVID. And so there was this national crisis, and to spur economic activity, interest rates were reduced. Another time that rates were really, really low was coming out of the housing crash back in 2008. And so we always need to be aware of that. You want to make sure that you still have a job to get qualified when interest rates do come down. Now, looking ahead, there is now a 96% vote of confidence from economists that the Fed will, in fact, reduce rate cuts in September. But what the question now is has that rate cut already been factored in from this most recent drop that we had here in the last couple of weeks? Interest rates are down, 3/8 to a half percentage point. And then the other question that we need to ask ourselves is, what is that magic number where buyers really start to come off the sidelines in droves to pursue housing options again? Is it 6%? Is it 5.75? Is it 5.5%? We don't know that. And I think some of that is market specific, like we were talking about a moment ago. When things are a little bit more affordable, interest rates matter less. And when they're not as affordable, they matter a little bit more. But the other area that I wanted to go and talk about is these temporary buy downs. And so this is why these temporary buy downs are so important. So number one, the reason a temporary buy down is so important. Well, let me back up. How does a temporary buy down work? So if you're a buyer, you can get a 1.0, a 2.1, or a 3.21 temporary buy down. So as an example, if the note rate is 7% on a 1.0 buy down, what that would mean is that you'd have an interest rate of 6% for 12 months, and then it would mature back to the note rate, or 7% in that example. A 2.1 buy down would be a note rate of 7%, so still the same, except in year one, you would have an interest rate of 5%. And then in year two, it would go up to 6%. And then year three is when it would mature to the 7%. A 3.21 buy down with a note rate of 7% will allow you to go all the way down to 4% for year one, 5% for year two, 6% for year three, and then mature at 7%. But what I love most about the temporary buy downs is they're a subsidy. They're not a cost. So if you buy the interest rate down on a permanent basis, that's a cost. So what you don't want to happen is you pay points or several thousands of dollars to buy the interest rate down to get a lower interest rate on a permanent rate buy down. That's a cost. Only to have interest rates organically come down 6 months later. How would you feel if you spent $5,000 to $10,000 to get a lower interest rate, and then lower interest rates just organically came down over the next 6 to 12 months? I would just feel terrible about refinancing then, wouldn't you?
And isn't it also the case if you were to sell your house, if it was a permanent rate buy down, that money is basically sunk, right? If you pay $5,000 or $10,000 to buy it down and then you sell, you're not getting that part back.
It's a one-time cost, and you will never get it back. And that's the difference between a cost and a subsidy. So what's great about the subsidy is that, and again, to qualify for a temporary buy down, you need to have the seller provide the funds for the temporary buy down. So that sounds outrageous, except it's a buyer's market right now. And so I always get the question, am I better off asking for a sales price reduction, or am I better off asking the seller to give me a seller credit to pay for all of my closing costs or potentially a buy down. And I think the knee-jerk reaction for most people is that they think the sales price reduction is better. But here's the deal, though. Let's just say that you're putting 20% down, and option A is you put the home is listed for $500,000, and you want to put an offer in at $490,000. Well, 20% of $490,000 and $500,000, it's not a big difference. It's very, very small, and the mortgage payment, because it's amortized over 30 years, it's going to be $40 to $50 a month, somewhere in that range. That's the only benefit you're going to see. So you're going to see a very small difference out of pocket. I mean, let's just run the numbers really quick. 20%.
Have bigger savings just not going to Starbucks for the couple weeks than it would be. You know what I mean? Like it's pennies.
Yeah. So 20% of 500,000 is 100,000. So option A, you would put 100,000 down, and if you ask for a sales price reduction, you got your offer approved at 490,000. Well, your down payment would go from 100,000 to 98,000. So your down payment would be $2,000 less, and then your mortgage payment would be around $40 less per month. So that's option A. Option B is you could pay $500,000 for the home, and then remember, you got to pay for all of your closing costs, your homeowner's insurance, the appraisal, everything else. So let's just, in this example, let's just say that all of that stuff together is $10,000. So in option A, you get your offer accepted. It's listed at $500,000. You get your offer accepted at $490,000. But then you got to pay for all of the closing costs. You're saving a little bit in the down payment, but then you got to pay all of that money for all of your closing costs, prepaids, everything else. Option B, you leave the sales price at $500,000. You put 20% down on that, but then you get a seller credit for $10,000. So from the seller's perspective, those offers are identical because the seller is going to be netting the exact same. The difference, though, with option B, which is you actually pay more for the property and then get $10,000 back immediately, is that you put $10,000 in your pocket right from day one. Now, your payment is going to be $50 higher a month, but would you rather have a payment that's $50 higher per month and an additional $10,000 in your pocket? I would. Mm-hmm. But everyone doesn't have my same vision and my same goal. So some of that depends on how long do you see yourself being in the property? What are your specific goals? And then here's the other great thing. If you choose to use that $10,000 to do a temporary buy down, whether it's a 1-0, 2-1, or 3-2-1, that $10,000 will actually go into your escrow account with your mortgage servicer. So that's literally your money. But then here's what's great. If interest rates come down and if you pay off, let's say, for example, that you did a 2-1 buy down. So that subsidy is good for 24 months. And how that works is when you have the subsidy, that's essentially what funds the difference between the note rate and the buy down rate. So if your note rate was 7% and you did a 2-1 buy down, the interest rate in year one would be 5%. The difference between the 5 and the 7%, that it comes from the subsidy in your escrow account. So a portion of that comes out every month until it's finally depleted within the buy down period. So in that case, 24 months. But let's say that interest rates come down organically. You start off with $10,000 in your buy down account from the subsidy. And let's say that interest rates come down 4 months from now. And now it makes sense to refinance. And you still have $7,500 in your subsidy escrow account from your temporary buy down. Well, if you refinance that and you refinance into a permanent lower interest rate, whatever is in your escrow account, you get that money back. It's your money. So that can pay for all the closing costs on the refinance. You can get it subtracted off of your principal balance on the mortgage. You can get a check back for $7,500. So if you feel like interest rates are going to come down, it's a much better way, in my opinion, to manage interest rate risk and still get the benefits of lower rates because you're not the one that's taking the risk. And if they do come down, you get that money back.
Yeah, I love that.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I think right now too, with it being at a higher rate than it's been for quite some time, I just can't imagine that it's going to be going up much higher. I think it's finally, at its peak. It's coming back down a bit just to stimulate the economy and everything else that's going on, just with the motivation behind a little bit more realistic interest rate that's going to give more people the opportunity to be homeowners.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that long-winded way of saying that I think it's pretty easy and safe bet to say that we are kind of close to that peak, at least for the near future, meaning the next few years. We're doing a temporary buy down. You're not risking the opposite happening, where not having a permanent lock on your interest rate and then having it go up in 2 years to 10% or something. That's just wanted to kind of share that with our audience too, that the risk of doing a temporary buy down is, if 2 years from now, say you do a 2-1 buy down. So if at 7% today, so it's 5% year one, 6% year two, and then it goes back to what the interest rate is.
Mm-hmm.
You just got to be aware of that. If it's an adjustable rate mortgage, that, if it's going the other way, could bite you in the butt. But just the fact that it is already pretty high right now, I think there's even a better chance that that's not going to happen.
Yeah, and a lot of these buy down options do have fixed rates, and so if that is a concern of yours, you can actually do a buy down with a fixed rate. But yeah, kind of to your point, I think what you're describing is that the opportunity cost here, these aren't historically low interest rates that you're giving up. It's not like interest rates are at 2% right now and you're having to walk away from a 2% rate that could potentially be historic. This is a way that if you feel interest rates are going to come down, it gives you the ability to lock in a lower rate, a lower payment today, still be on a fixed rate, but then have the benefit where if rates do come down, you have the ability to get that subsidy back. It's not costing you anything, and that's been one of the frustrating things with this market. It's really since 2022. The way that I'm describing it with my customers, my referral partners, is it feels like the interest rate drop is always 6 months out, but it never comes. Mm-hmm. It's always within reach and within sight, but it's just slightly out of reach. It's almost like a mirage. But I do feel kind of like what you just said. We're finally developing some positive momentum in the market, and I'll throw this in there just really briefly. That index or that consumer price index report came out today, and there were some inflation numbers that were potentially a little bit concerning there, and so that's kind of the opposite. So there's so much data coming in right now. As far as jobs, economy. I like to read other articles about what's happening in Vegas, and it seems like things are really slowing down in Vegas again. So typically, again, what's bad for the economy is good for interest rates. So if there is a recession or if things slow down, and it appears that they are, then at that point, that's usually when interest rates would come down.
And just from your experience, if there is a rate drop in September, I know we don't have a crystal ball, but most likely it'll probably be 0.25%, right? So let's just say in September, if the rate's at 6.5%, they might drop it down to 6.25, something like that.
Yeah, that's what's being factored in right now. So the most recent article that I read is that there's a 96% likelihood that the Fed funds rate will come down a quarter point. So that's currently what the expectation is and what is being priced in the market as of right now. Again, though, some of these economic reports and as this news comes out, that stuff still is very fluid and things are still very volatile. And from a loan perspective, from an originator perspective, that's one thing that's been very frustrating with my job, where really from 2017 to 2021, we were in these trends, these swings where rates they might kind of swing up, but then they would go down. It was very stable. And, now it's been very sporadic, even on a daily basis almost, where there can be these big swings intraday. And so, from when disclosures go out with a certain customer, like this last week, for example, there's been a couple of customers where I've disclosed loan documents and the interest rate has changed significantly in just a couple of days. And so that can be very frustrating at times if you as an originator, you disclose something and then it goes the opposite direction. If I disclose a rate and then all of a sudden rates are higher 24 hours later or 48 hours later, that can be very frustrating for all parties.
Mm-hmm. I don't have the exact stats, but I read somewhere recently that I think it was saying if If the rate goes down 0.5%, then that's going to motivate about 500,000 or about 500,000 more buyers to enter back into the market. So
Mm-hmm.
you think through that comment a minute ago about how it's still very much of a seller's market, but there's a lot of expectation that that might shift in the next 6 months. That's kind of where that mindset is coming from, is just there's a lot of people that are sitting on the sidelines right now. And once it gets to this certain number, a lot of those people are going to be motivated enough at that point to get back in the game. So
yeah, and that's the
wait and see.
estimate right now, that there is 500,000 more sellers than buyers. And so if we can get some of these buyers to come off the sidelines and start taking action, and I've been very open about this. This last 8 weeks for me as an originator have been probably the most difficult and frustrating of my entire career. The apps are still coming in, but number one, getting folks qualified right now is very, very difficult. It's just, debt to income ratio within 100th of a%. If literally things like, if your insurance comes in $10 higher annually, you don't qualify. If the HOA payment is $2 lower, you do qualify. And so figuring that stuff out, that's how tight some of these deals are. But then, there's also customers that we are getting pre-approved, and they're just deciding to not take action. They're deciding to sit on the sidelines and wait. So I'm seeing that happen just as much. And so the buyers are there, but they just haven't decided to, or in some cases, take full advantage of what's out there. So if I'm a buyer and you're looking to get out in the market right now, Denver, wherever, you want to make sure that you take full advantage of this buyer's market that we're in, because this is the strongest buyer's market that we've experienced in the last 15 years. And you don't have to feel bad asking about seller concessions. You don't have to feel bad about writing your offer with the price reductions. As you just said, 40% of listings right now either had price reductions or seller concessions. That is the reality. You want to take advantage of that. That's how the game is played. Right now, buyers have more leverage. They have more opportunities. Take advantage of it, because this is your shot.
Mm-hmm. And I'll kind of end my perspective on all of this with this final thought is, with real estate, especially with real estate investing, but real estate in general, you make your money off of a good purchase.
Yeah.
Even more so than the appreciation. So just understanding that as a buyer, this is such a great opportunity to get a really good deal and just be that far ahead. So, a year or two from now, getting your loan refinanced, having a lot of that appreciation get built up where you're just able to really catch it on that low and see the massive growth, as opposed to the exact opposite, including my current house where, bought in 2021, where kind of bought at the peak. And now I'm a little upside down, to be honest. So now it's a matter of just kind of waiting, for the curve to change direction and kind of go back up. So just a little final thought on my end about just how important it is to make with a strong real estate investment. It's always about the buy more than it is the sell.
Yeah, that's such a great point. And that I always tell my customers, I'm not here to give you the answers, because I don't know exactly what you're thinking, what's important to you, what your goals are, but I am here to make sure that you're asking yourself the right questions. And one of the questions I ask my prospective clients when they're going through some of these thoughts, do I buy now? Do I wait? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? If you feel like you see yourself being a homeowner 5 years from now or 10 years from now, what that means is the reality is that then right now is the time to buy.
Mm-hmm.
Because things are just going to get more, it's going to be more difficult or more challenging, more expensive to buy a home, more than likely 3 years from now than it is today, especially 5 and 10 years from now. It's so funny. When I moved back from Phoenix, Arizona, back to Denver in 2015, I thought property values here were so inflated. Because I had just sold my place in Phoenix for $199,000. And I bought my place here in Denver for about 2.5 times that. And that was such a shock to me. Values are this much here for a regular home in a decent area, that. But now You rewind the clock back 10 years, because it's almost been exactly 10 years. It'll be 10 years exactly in December. It's like, oh my gosh, man, I'm so thankful that I made that decision, even though at the time I thought property values were potentially significantly overvalued, because that's what happens with appreciating assets. They go up in value, and they will always go up in value. And so, kind of tying all of this in, if you think you are going to own a home 5 years from now and 10 years from now, the best decision that you can make is buy as soon as possible. And the reality is when you have that perspective, a 6.75% interest rate and a 6.25% interest rate means very little over the next decade.
Yeah, it'd be fun to like do a little napkin math sometime. Maybe we do this on a future episode where let's just use that 5 or 10 year example where, let's just say over the course of 5 years, having a rate at 7% instead of 5%. If it was 5% right now, so many more people would be actively pursuing buying real estate right now in Denver. Mm-hmm. So let's just use that 2% differential over the course of the next 5 years before, let's just say that maybe it goes back down to that 5% rate. Just in that 5 years, the amount of extra interest you're paying on that extra 2% over 5 years. I mean, what is that? That might be like 20, 30 grand. I don't know what it is, but just it's very minimal in the big scheme of things. You're still benefiting from all these other aspects with tax write-offs, with appreciation, opportunities to do sweat equity, just improving the property yourself and adding value that way. There's just so many other ways to kind of leverage against the risk, which you can't do with very many other types of investments.
That's the thing that always cracks me up, is that in America, we have been trained, and I'll say brainwashed, to be so focused on interest rate without understanding what that actually means. Mm-hmm. And so we're so focused on interest rates and interest rates coming down, but what does that actually mean? And the ironic part is when I run the numbers, kind of what you just described, it's never as wow as people think it is. It's like, that's it? Mm-hmm. That's all that's the difference. Let me just open up my mortgage calculator really quick.
And while you're doing that, just the example again of it's keeping people from even. I know there's some issues with people just not being able to qualify, but for people that are able to qualify but are still sitting on the sidelines, they're making this massive. They're not making this massive decision that is going to change the direction of their life in a positive way, most likely, just because of this one little clickbait, kind of headline that's just driving everybody's concerns and just pessimism.
So let me share an example with you. So again, this is just to kind of put things into perspective. On a $400,000 loan amortized over 30 years, we have an interest rate of 7%, which is where we were 2 or 3 weeks ago. The principal and interest on that, again, $400,000, 7% interest rate, 30-year loan term, is $2,661. Now let's bring that rate down to 6.25. So write down the 2,661. Let's bring the interest rate down to 6.25. Sounds significant, right? Mm-hmm. That's a significant rate drop, going from 7% down to 6.25. The payment would be $2,462. So not even $200 a month.
Yeah, it's like 180. And that's almost a full percent.
And so people, when they hear that, in their minds, they're expecting, like if I share that example with someone, I'll say, how much do you think your payment's going to come down? They'll be like, $700. Well, no, so people are just out of touch. And that's always my thing. We're so focused on rate, but what does it actually mean for us?
Yeah, 100, 150, 160, whatever that dollar amount was a month. Think about all the other ways that you could creatively, with some discipline, avoid spending that. Maybe it's cutting a couple Comcast cable bills. Maybe it's not going on that vacation you really wanted to go to this year. There's so many different ways. Stop drinking the $6 latte every single day at Starbucks. You could easily make up that $150 a month difference and be able to be a homeowner today instead of waiting and letting the news and the media, prolong that for another year or two. For no reason.
And that's exactly what I'm saying, where if you see yourself being a homeowner 5 or 10 years from now, the best time to buy is today. And that's exactly right. Netflix, if you're someone that goes out to the bars or you smoke cigarettes or drink alcohol, I mean, you could make that up in a couple of weeks, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What do you willing to
Don't
sacrifice,
wait
though?
to buy. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. I'm going to leave you guys with that little nugget. Just get that tattooed on you somewhere, and so you don't forget it. Write it on your
Mic
bathroom
drop.
mirror. I think that's a good one.
Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait.
Mm. Well, guys,
That's
hope you
it.
enjoyed this one. I know we went a little bit longer than we expected, but we definitely, I think, had some good stuff to share with you, especially if you're just a little confused, uncertain about what's going on right now and what's to come here in the next quarter in 2025. So if you have any more specific questions, as always, this one was a little bit more geared towards Ben with his extensive knowledge with interest rates. But if you have any questions that you want to just run by him directly, just a more personal one-on-one strategy session, he is always available, as am I. So you can get either of our contact information in the show notes or just look for us on social media and online. You guys can find us there as well. Ben, you can find him with American Money 101, and you can find me with Adam Sells Denver.
Love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week. See you later.